Hello and welcome. You have officially enrolled in the Patient Lift Safety Training course provided by Drive DeVilbiss Healthcare. Please pay close attention to our disclaimer. Like many other procedures, patient transfers need to be practiced often for those performing them to become proficient and safe at the task. This practice involves lifting patients from the bed to a wheelchair or standard chair, and from the seated position back to the bed and from the floor to another surface. Always read and familiarize yourself with the owner's manual and maintenance schedule. This Patient Lift Safety Training course consists of several parts. First, we'll cover patient lift and sling basics. Then, we will present the three main parts of a patient lift, including the base, the mast, and the boom. We'll then go into greater detail on proper sling usage and finish out showing the lifting process from start to finish. When this video is completed, you'll be enrolled in a short quiz to ensure you've understood everything involved with safely using patient lift equipment. To help you stay organized and on top of your annual certification, Drive will provide you with a detailed certificate showing you took and understood the content presented today. You'll also receive a competency checklist to ensure all staff know how to safely operate Drive series of patient lifts in order to meet your facility's accreditation requirements. Part 1. Patient Lift and Sling Basics. Before we get into the details, let's begin with some patient lift and sling basics. Safety for you and your patient is always top priority, which is why we should always follow OSHA guidelines and never lift anything over 35 pounds. Always use good body mechanics throughout the entire lifting process. Keep your center of gravity low to the ground and rely more on your lower body muscles. Establish a broad base of support by separating your feet. Always keep your spine in a natural body alignment. Never ever twist your body while lifting. Always inspect the resident's slings before using it. Wear, tear, and loose stitching are signs of an unsafe sling that need to be replaced. Types of slings used in facilities today are full body, divided leg, transfer slings, commode slings with or without head support. Most common, and what we'll use today, is the U-shaped or divided leg sling with head support. Always review the identifying label for each sling, which contains weight capacities and warnings. If you cannot read the label, the sling must be replaced. Labels should be faced away from the patient, closer to the resident's head or upper torso area. Part 2. Powered Patient Lifts. Drive DeVilbiss Healthcare's FLP series full body patient lifts are safe tools for lifting and transferring non-ambulatory immobile or partially immobile or obese patients. These battery-powered patient lifts make it easier and safer to move these types of patients. Patients can be moved from and to their bed, wheelchair, commode, or even the floor. Depending on the type of lift, the Drive FLP series can safely lift up to 600 pounds. Let's familiarize ourselves with the FLP series, Levantar, and Gravis powered lifts by Drive, starting from the bottom of the unit to the top. Basically, there are three main parts: the base, the mast, and the boom. Let's start with the base and move up from there. The base rides over the floor on four oversized sealed casters. Generally, the two wheels under the mast are lockable. Next, the legs, which are adjustable. Always maneuver the lift with the legs closed when moving through tight hallways, through doorways, or around furniture. Some Drive lifts will have motorized legs that open and close with the touch of a button. When using a lift with a powered base, utilize the hand control will allow you to easily open and close the base with a push of a button. On Drive's powered base models, the legs will automatically lock whenever the hand control switch is released. Other Drive lifts have a manual type base. To open these types of bases, use the padded lift handle. Simply grab the steering handle with one hand and the padded shift handle with the other. Pull back on the shifter handle and move the handle to the right, the legs will open. Make sure the shifter handle is locked into place here before attempting to use the lift. This is one of the most critical steps to be consistent with before ever moving a patient or resident. The lift is most stable when the base of the lift is open and locked into position, helping to ensure the weight of the patient is safely distributed and balanced. After the transfer using the lift is complete, simply reverse the process to close the base before maneuvering the lift out of the room, down the hallway, or back to its storage area. The next main portion of a patient lift we will cover is the mast. Here you will find ergonomically designed push and pull handles, a hand pendant for the operator's controls, the battery on powered models, and a control box and the actuator that actually lifts the patient. Attached to the mast is the boom, or the lifting arm of the lift. At the end is the swivel bar, which is where the sling attaches. The boom is operated by using the control module or hand pendant. With the push of a button, you can quietly and smoothly raise or lower the boom. On power designs, the power comes from a 24-volt battery and a mounted battery charger. While one battery is in use, the other can be charged on an optional charging stand to ensure it's always ready when you need it. It takes about 3 hours to fully charge a Drive Series lift battery. You'll know when a battery needs more power through an audio alarm as well as a battery indicator on both the unit and the hand control. Just like your smartphone, you can quickly see how much power your lift has at any point in time. To replace the battery on your Drive Series lift, simply squeeze the handle from the top of the battery to unlock the battery from its mount. Pull the battery towards you to clear the brackets, then lift the battery up and towards you. Mount the charged battery by sliding along the bracket until it rests in its cradle. Then push it towards the unit until it clicks. No need to remember to disconnect the DC connection for a fully charged battery. Drive lifts will not overcharge batteries. If the unit is plugged into a wall outlet, your onboard battery will continue to charge unless the emergency button is locked. This emergency feature is used to halt all power to the unit. To restore, rotate the stop button to the right. In the rare case that the power fails on your lift while handling a patient, you can safely lower a patient to their bed, wheelchair, or to the ground by hand by twisting the device at the top of the actuator. Here are some additional tips to keep in mind before we move on to taking a closer look at slings. Keeping in compliance is critical to the success of any long-term care facility. When using Drive's FLP series lifts, staying compliant is a breeze with Drive's maintenance control feature. Review your manual to better understand how this feature can help to show accreditations that you are organized and putting in the effort. In case you missed it, the boom can be operated using either the hand pendant or control module. While lifting any patient or resident, it can be helpful to communicate what you are attempting to do with the resident themselves. This can reduce resident anxiety and make the lifting process more safe and pleasant for all involved. For troublesome residents who struggle being lifted using a patient lift, it can be helpful to give them the perception that they are in control of the lift. To do this, simply unplug the hand pendant and use the control module to safely raise and lower the resident. Finally, Drive FLP series lifts are available with an optional patient scale. Keep this in mind to reduce the burden of having to place residents on an actual physical scale. Moving on to part 3, a closer look at slings. Drive offers several types of patient lift slings to meet most any situation. They're made of soft, durable mesh or solid fabric with padded areas for additional comfort. Although one sling can safely accommodate many different residents or patients, it is always recommended that a specific sling stay with each patient to meet their specific size, weight, medical condition, preference, infection control, and transfer requirements. Always consult with a healthcare professional before making a sling selection for any resident. Slings are available in 3 main styles: the full body or comfort, the divided leg or universal, and a sling constructed for toileting. The full body and divided leg slings have built-in headrests for residents with limited stability, and the full body has an optional commode opening. The divided leg and toileting sling fits around a seated person and can also include head support. Always inspect each sling for safety before use. Check for wear, tears, and loose stitching. Bleached, torn, loose, worn, or frayed slings are not safe and should not be used. Use the label to identify the head section and always ensure it is facing away from the patient. You can adjust the sling for different body positions by using different combinations of color-coded loops that are sewn into each strap. For a flat position, attach the sling using the same colored loops from all 4 straps. For a seated position, use the loops closest to the resident for the head, and for the legs, use the loops farthest away from the resident. No matter the position, make sure the colors on each side are the same. All drive slings have reinforced grab straps sewn into the back to make it easier and safer to move your residents. Although most manufacturer lifts, including drives, are designed to be utilized by a single caregiver, it is always recommended to use 2 caregivers to lift any resident. Best practices for sling usage is to remove each sling after the transfer is complete and to reinsert the sling prior to the resident being transferred again. This is easiest when using the divided leg or U-sling, as mentioned earlier. Before you attempt any lift, understand the resident's limitations and their ability to assist in the transfer. As discussed earlier, always communicate every step as you work through it. This will help to ensure each resident learns and becomes comfortable with the lifting routine, helping ensure everyone stays on the same page and is safe and comfortable throughout the lifting process. Now, 2 examples of a lift from start to finish. Our start-to-finish lift begins with a resident in their bed with a divided leg sling already carefully placed beneath the resident. Remember, best practices for slings are to remove after each use, set aside in a safe place, and place back under the same resident when they need to be transferred again. When using a divided leg sling, the last step is to cross the U-straps under the resident's thighs. Now we can begin to guide the patient lift into place, making sure the legs of the lift are in the open position. Make sure to guide the lift slowly and explain to the resident what is about to take place. The position achieved by adjusting loops will always depend on the height and build of the resident. Attachment loops at the shoulder and the head level determine the position of the back, and attachment straps at the legs determine the approximate degree of flexion at the hips. So it's easier to transfer residents from a bed to a wheelchair or other seated surface when you select loops closest to the sling's body. The rule of thumb is the shorter the shoulder straps, the more upright the resident will be during the lift. To do this, watch as our clinician carefully selects each of the 6 points on the sling and connects them to the cradle. She uses the colored loops furthest from the resident for the base, the middle loops for the resident's back, and the closest loops to the resident for the head and the neck. Notice our clinician checks each strap as she begins to lift the resident out of the bed. Remember, whatever position you are going to lift a patient in, seated or flat, the colors on each side of the cradle always must match. Here, our clinician gently lowers the bed, allowing her to carefully move the lift away from the bed and reposition it to the wheelchair. Notice how she repositions the resident's feet toward the mast of the lift. Remember, good body mechanics are required throughout the process. Here, our clinician uses good form to engage the locks on each side of the wheelchair. Once the resident is safely placed above the wheelchair, watch as our clinician uses good body mechanics, bending at the knees while using the handles stitched into the back of the sling to begin to lower the resident safely, smoothly, and effortlessly into the wheelchair. Our clinician continues to lower the boom, making it easier to remove each of the loops from the cradle while keeping the resident calm, engaged, and protected throughout. Once the sling is completely removed from the cradle, the lift is removed and our clinician uses best practices to remove the sling from beneath the resident before storing it away in a safe place for the resident to use again next time. In our second lift from start to finish, we will demonstrate how a lift is completed when lifting a resident from the floor to their bed. If your resident has fallen, make sure they're okay and ready to be lifted. Place a pillow under their head and position a sling, ideally a full body sling, under the resident. Pan folding the sling and gently turning the resident to their side can make this process easier. Prior to guiding the lift into place, make sure the legs are in the open position and the sling is not in the way of the casters. As you guide the lift into place, gently lift the resident's lower legs over the lift's base. Then begin to lower the boom. As the boom lowers, this is a great time to check in with the resident and explain what is happening. Communicating each step of the process is key to keeping residents comfortable throughout the entire process. Unlike our previous example, here we will use a 4-point full body sling. Also, unlike our previous example, since we will be transferring this resident from the ground to the bed, another flat surface, we will want to use the same colored loops on each of the 4 points of the cradle. Notice how our clinician connects the loops. She starts by connecting the loops to the cradle hooks furthest from the resident's head. then uses the hand control to raise the boom just slightly to connect the remaining loops. This is done to ensure the sling straps don't rub up against the resident's face. Once all 4 sling strap loops are secured to the cradle, remove the pillow and slowly use the hand or staff controls to raise the resident from the ground. Watch as our model clinician checks the resident's position in the sling's loop connection with the cradle, the sling itself, and the comfort level of the resident while lifting the resident from the ground. Once the resident is in the lifted position and the resident is facing you and the mast of the lift, you can guide the lift into place. Then turn the resident so they are centrally positioned over the bed, feet towards the footboard, head towards the headboard. Now we can use the hand pendant to gently lower the resident to the bed, being careful to protect the resident's head from the cradle. Carefully remove each loop from the cradle before moving the lift out of the way. As mentioned before, we recommend leaving the sling with each resident. You can now move on to completing the quiz and earning your certificate of completion for the Patient Lift Safety Training course provided by Drive to Vilbis Healthcare.